commendation. So we'll proceed. And this is, I think, first we read, I'll ask the clerk to read in the item that we're on.
Resolution 73-15 urges the mayor to enter into a multi-year agreement for one or more contracts for zero-waste educational programs. Suggested contract be for 3 years with the option of 2 one-year extensions to educate residents and businesses on how to sort trash and reduce waste, introduced by Ms. Willie. Note there is a pending motion by Ms. Willie and duly seconded by Mr. Paleka to recommend adoption of Resolution 73-15 and Communication 111.1 from Councilmember Margaret Willie, dated March 2, 2015, transmitting a proposed amendment to Resolution 73-15.
Okay. So we're out of... this is my resolution, so I'm going to refer this committee, move this over to the chair of the Finance Committee to manage from here on.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Willie. For the record, I will assume the chair of this committee at this time. And council members, is there discussion on Resolution 73-15? There's a pending motion. So, Ms. Willie.
Okay. I'm going to make a few general statements, and then I'm going to go into I have an amendment that I'd like to make. And just to stress that our policy for solid waste is a policy of zero waste, and that's moving towards reducing, reuse, recycle, composting. We have an integrated resource solid waste management plan. We have an implementation plan. We passed a resolution in October 15th, 2014, reinforcing all of this, Resolution 525-14. I just want to read one sentence from this book that I'm sure you all are very familiar with here, and that's everything I'm taking from that. And just the first sentence of Section 5 talks about public education is a critical component of a successful environmental program as it informs citizens about proper solid waste management methods and ways to reduce waste and enhance public understanding and participation in various reuse and recycling activities. And the only thing really to add on to that, it's not about just educating individuals, it's businesses, institutions down the line. And really, education is a cost avoidance measure from the financial point of view of the county. We spend, I believe it's somewhere between $40 to $70 a ton on average once discarded items, waste comes into the county. The person who's head of recycling over in Maui talked about that if they, to the extent that they're diverting waste from that, such as through their educational programs, it costs them $4. They figure that's what it costs. So every ton that we divert, by way of including education, we're saving, whether it's $36 to $66 a ton, a lot of money. This is, let me just say, this is really one of a whole package of zero waste bills and resolutions I'll have. More coming up. So I do have some financial measures, how we would pay for these, all of the different programs at that time. But I would say we do have over $3 million in our carryover budget estimated that we did not spend on solid waste that's in that budget this past year. And we canceled our principal educational component program last June. There's been nothing done since then. So that's just to put a framework. I did give a couple communications, one to give you what's out of the general plan on solid waste, and then also a copy of the section in the code on refuse, which is like a patchwork. It's clearly never been sort of reviewed in its totality. So at this point, I'd just like to make the current bill as it stands actually provides for multi-year contracts and extends for 3 years with extensions. And we did have discussion on this last time to say that getting into that level of detail really doesn't seem necessary. I do think it's good to have multi-year contracts just because that gets people invested. You tend to have pay less for them, and then it would also means it comes back to the council, and we can stay on top of it and keep informed. So, but the amendment would take out the details of that. So at this time, I'd like to move to amend a resolution 73-15.
Second.
With communication 111.2.
111.1.
Oh, is it 1.1? Yeah, whatever it is. Okay.
It was moved by Ms. Willie and seconded by Mr. Iligan to amend Resolution 73-15 with the contents of Communication 111.1. Discussion. Ms. Willie.
And again, this was in response to concerns by council members to not, yes, urge the mayor to do this. I still think saying we're urging a multi-year contract, it's a resolution, it's not a bill, but take out the details.
Well, thank you, Ms. Willie. Anybody else? Mr. Paleka.
I'm totally in support of the intent of this resolution to provide education in terms of solid waste program and moving toward recycling. What I'd like to see, though, is any consideration for a position, because we always go to this contract. I'd rather see an individual or positions within the county that are an integral part of the system, a real part of the system. To have someone with contracts outside, to me, seems counterproductive. If you really want a system that's dedicated to recycling and moving in the right direction, then it should be a part of that ohana in making our recycle efforts a real gainful one. We've heard testimony that we've had education for 10 years. To be quite frank, the attitude of our community hasn't really moved that much forward in terms of the 10 years with contracts out there. I think the system itself, the solid waste department, has to embrace that we need to recycle. And the only way that I see us moving forward in that direction is for the whole department, or at least the positions. I might be wrong, but I'd rather we look into at least that option, because contracting all the time, to me, doesn't always solve the problem. And if you wanna entice or invite the best and the brightest in terms of recycling, maybe municipality or people that have done this successfully, to have them become a part of the solution, is to have them become a part of that department or system. So, I mean, I'm open to the discussion on contract, but to me, I would like to have that option or look into also permanent positions. I know I had the discussion with Margaret this morning about this, in having positions or individuals, or but within our department, within our county ohana. Thank you.
Did you wish to respond, Ms. Willie?
Yeah. I mean, we do have someone, Linda Peters, who's now head of the recycling, and I think if we want to add someone to the budget and add another person and doing that for outreach, but I think the general, in looking around and talking to the other people in the other counties, it's getting people outreach and getting more, more. I mean, I want to see multiple and not one, and get people out into the
Thank you, Ms. Willie. Ms. Poindexter.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with Mr. Paleka, or Councilmember Paleka. I totally agree with that. And everybody knows that I have always supported that it be at the grassroots level, because we are doing wonderful things in our communities. And we are working on education. The communities, and one of the testifiers said, yeah, well, it's all volunteers. So with what Mr. Paleka had just brought up, if we have a position that is there, and another testifier said, train the trainers. That's exactly what needs to happen with the model that Mr. Paleka is talking about. Because it shouldn't be contract out. Contracts come, contracts go. There's no stable, somebody stable there for the communities that they need to go to for support or maintenance. So I really, really like what Mr. Paleka had stated. So I know that a lot of people have testified in favor of, everybody wants education, definitely. And Margaret, as well as I do, in Hamakua, especially our third Thursday, Chair, I was just addressing Councilmember Margaret Willey, that, she's aware of the Third Thursday Thrive groups and things that are happening in Hamakua for education. So with the support of the county to make sure that those groups stay vibrant and alive and keep the fire burning for them, I believe that it should be a position that comes from the county supporting our communities. Because should we become isolated, we want to be able to manage within our own communities and not looking for that contract worker or a contract person. So a lot of good things are already happening in the communities. So I'll yield at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Iligan.
I just want to keep in mind, we're still on the amendment. I do want to speak, but I'll speak when the main motion.
Thank you, Mr. Iligan. Are you going to speak on the amendment? Okay. Anybody else wishing to speak on Communication 111.1? Yes, on the amendment. Your microphone.
The amendment is taking out the details of contracting. It's not taking out the question, do we contract or hire someone as an education specialist?
Yeah. And excuse me, council members, any other discussion on the amendment? I'd just like to add that Ms. Willey did bring this forward at the request of the council from the last meeting. And so with that, would you like me to take a roll call vote or voice vote? Okay. All in favor of amending with Communication 111.1, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that's 8 ayes. And now we can go back to discussion on the main motion, Resolution 73, as amended.
Okay.
Ms. Willey.
Yeah. I don't want to oppose if we were to hire an additional, someone who's an educational specialist. I think that would be part of budget talks starting in July. I still think urging let's get back on track and doing the educational program is important. And if we want to, look at hiring someone as specialists, okay. I think there are pros and cons either way. Okay. And I don't think it's been, the past 10 years has been, we haven't gotten anywhere. We have done a lot. The communities have done a lot. So perhaps we could do more. But we've been sitting here without anything since last June, and was renegotiated a contract. But I'm not saying, I like to see the more. Let's get diverse ideas, diverse people, and I think there's a benefit to that. But I'm not, if we want to say we're hiring and doing such as other places do, an education specialist, and start from that angle and then see whether we need contracts after that or not, I'm open to it. But I don't want to get where we're into the budget and now it's we're not doing either. So it's either, do we start with contracts, look at whether we need a full-time person? I don't want to hear, so-and-so who's in the department can add this on to their role. It's not happening. Linda Peters does not have time to get out there. or anyone else that's in there, and it's not focused on that area of education. So I yield at that. I want to just hear what others have to say, if any other.
Thank you, Ms. Willie. Mr. Paleka.
So are we going to request that an RFP go out? Because the thing is, for myself, I want to see real change. If we're going to contract out again, I want to see measurable differences. Yeah. And to me, we should get the best and the brightest. The people that have a proven track record of moving municipalities, states, counties, who have a proven track record of going from point A to point B in terms of moving their recycle program forward. Okay? Not from, and this is not to say we haven't moved forward as a county in terms of recycling. We have done that. But and education is an integral part. I understand. I lived it. I've seen it happen. But for me, in seeing the difference of a place that really went and moved forward, as opposed to, I'm sorry to say, the county of Hawaii, it happened pretty quickly there, and it's not happening here. I'm just going to be frank. That's the way I am. I'm going to tell you the way I see them. I call them like I see them. So that's why I'm saying, if you really want change, you got to get the best and the brightest. That's all I'm saying. Contract, position, permanent positions, whatever. But I want to get the best now. Thank you.
Mr. Iligan, did you wish to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just make this quick. Committee Member Willie, I support your effort regarding zero waste. I'm with you on that. And the difference between, I guess, it's just our approach in how we're doing things. Just like what you mentioned about the whole details part, I kind of like to hash it out between the department heads first to find out what options we have, what we can do. And I wanted to ask, did you schedule a meeting with Director Letha Todd and kind of just sat down and find out what works, what can't, and so on? Has that even been tried?
Was that a question to Ms. Willie?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, may I ask a question to Committee Member Willie?
Ms. Willie.
Yes, I have been meeting with her several meetings, and with Greg and with Linda Peters, and I actually wanted this to come up on the next agenda to sort of, because we're sort of dealing with all pieces of a puzzle of how we, move forward.
So when you met with her, was this the conclusion of your meeting?
Was this the conclusion?
Yes.
I have submitted and asked for their, if they have any further comments and gone over it. If anything, they, I think, might lean towards having somebody in-house. But I think they're positive in terms of going forward with education.
So
I wouldn't have a problem.
If you could stick with me here, you just sent it to them and then asked for their feedback, or did you actually sit down?
I have sit-down meetings, several of them, and there are. I'd be happy to postpone this till next time.
And what did they say? What did they say? What did they say when you had those meetings? You said you had several meetings with them.
Yes, I did.
What was the outcome of those meetings? Was this the outcome of those meetings, or did you just decide, okay, I don't know. That's what I'm trying to ask.
I met with them. I met with many others. So I think their only thing comes up is often, well, how are we going to pay for this? Okay. So that was why I really wanted to do this in combination with other items, bills that I have coming forward next time.
Okay, so I guess there were still questions out there, and still exploring what are some ideas. And like I said, I see you attempt on the solid waste program, and this is one of your solutions that you see we can head towards without really getting the support, it seems, on the administration side. I sense that there's that lack. And you know what? There's really, I want to say, no right way on approaches nowadays, being in this position. I see things work from here, and I see things work from another way. And I just want to support the concept and move on. If it works, good. It's a win-win. But if it doesn't work, I'm not surprised. But I don't have high expectation that just passing this like this, it'll work. I feel like there's a lot more details that need to be hashed out, and I feel that needs to be done extensively outside of what we're doing right now, because I don't have the answer. And from hearing from others, what I heard from Councilmember Paleka is really we need to find the people who have those answers, and they're out there. It's just that just passing this, I'll support it. I will, just so we can move on and see what the outcome is for this.
Mr. Chung.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And such is or are the problems with resolutions. Resolutions don't have the force and effect of law. And in this situation, you meld a worthy policy statement with other things, and it becomes very confusing. So it's easy, like Mr. Ilagan just stated, to just say yeah, but I have to say no. I agree with the policy of zero waste. I agree that education is something that we should use as a tool. But like Mr. Paleka said, I'm going to say it a little bit differently. He's looking more in-house. Education really is a function of the people who are educating. This doesn't say anything about who those people might be. You addressed some of my concerns, Ms. Willie, that I brought up during the last go-around, about the multi-year aspect. And, you talked a little bit about the fiscal parts too, even not as much as I would like. But what I find most objectionable to this is we're urging the mayor to do something without even knowing what his position is on all of this. Now, piggybacking on what Mr. Ilagan asked, he asked whether you have met with Ms. Leadhead Todd. What I asked the last time was, or suggested is, speak to the mayor. He's only a couple steps away from our office. I know for a fact that Mayor Kinoy has a plan. He may have not presented it to us yet, and he hasn't presented it to me. We've only, kind of spoken about it briefly. But I know he has a plan, and I want to see what that plan is before we start urging him to do something. Let's know what the game plan is. When you urge the mayor to do something, it almost suggests that he's not doing something. And I don't want that statement to be put out there because, the mayor and I, we have our differences. And if it's so bad, yes, I will urge him to do something. But I don't think this situation calls for it, quite frankly. I trust the mayor to do, to come up with a real integrated plan. But he needs time to think about this thing. It's not just something you bring up and go, well, just blurt it out, right? Let's give him some time. And maybe, Miss Willie, if you can go speak to him, please go talk to him and see what's going on over there. That's my suggestion. So I'm going to be voting against this resolution if you guys don't mind. Thank you.
Just a minute. There's anybody else hasn't spoken yet? Then Ms. Poindexter.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say, following up on Councilmember Chung, is that there is a perception in the public, even if the resolution we know doesn't have the force of law, the public's perception is that it does. So when you pass a resolution, they're expecting it to be done. So that's the perception out there. And I don't want to give them this false perception, because I do support, this whole concept and the zero waste, definitely. I think every single one of us, we do. But like I agree with Councilmember Chung that we need to speak with administration, which Councilmember Willie says she has been speaking with administration. I don't think who you've spoken to has encouraged you to do it this way. So I'd like to see it, like, again, in our communities, and what way and what process, or what would be the best way to do it, that we would give the power to our communities. So again, I go back to putting it into the communities with the assistance of the county. And I yield at this time. Thank you. And I'm not supporting this resolution at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Willie.
Okay, let me say again, I didn't want this to come up now because I feel it's sort of out of the timeline and seeing where we go. And I will be offering bills, and I want to reinforce what Ms. Poindexter said, and Mr. Chung, that the resolutions are just urging, let's go ahead and do this. But in terms of what policies we have and what program, we are the policy board. The mayor, the executive branch, is the administration is the executive implementation branch. We already have a plan. We already have an implementation plan. We have all of that was paid for and done. And so everything that I'm doing is I'm taking right out of what we said we would do and what we spent, millions of dollars to put together these plans. So I, in many ways, I agree with what each of you have said, and I think that there are different things to mull in mind. And in fact, I almost feel we have to get it all on the table to think how to put them all together. And I think we really, getting down to the details, in some ways this is more of a detail, is not the best way. So I'm going to withdraw this at this time, and I will have several bills coming up next when we meet again. So.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Willie. The resolution has been withdrawn.
I sincerely am not desiring to throw a wrench into what just happened, but our council rules are fairly clear that once a matter has been amended, it is no longer available to be withdrawn.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Okay, let's vote.
Go ahead.
And again, I'm not desiring to throw another wrench into the proceedings, because it seems you're making progress, but I bring it to the chair's attention that we do have a section in our county code that provides that any legislation, whether it's a bill or resolution, that pertains to solid waste, wastewater, recycling, what have you, must be referred to the Director of Environmental Management and the Environmental Management Commission prior to council action. We've taken that to mean that before it moves out of committee, the motion is considered. And in fact, we actually had a Corporation Counsel opinion in the previous term that it really wasn't an option, that you pretty much just have to vote yes, and you have to refer this matter to the department for the director's consideration and the Environmental Management Commission's consideration.
Mr. Clerk, can I ask you just for a point of clarification? Then from what you've said, all we can do to this now is we could amend it further, but at that point we have to send it to the Environmental Management Commission?
There's several options. You could postpone it, you could keep it in committee, you can amend it further, but according to our past practice and our reading of the code, what you cannot do is vote it out of committee today to council.
And we have to send it to the commission.
Well, even a negative vote would move it to council with a negative recommendation. Therefore, we would still be in that quandary of the code saying the council is not supposed to take any action on these resolutions. So moving it to a council agenda puts it in jeopardy of the council taking action on it. Our practice has been is to keep it safe while it's still in committee, refer it to them, it comes back to committee, and then we move forward from that point.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Go ahead, Mr. Lacan.
Point of clarification, Mr. Clerk. I haven't read the code, but does it specify bill or reso? Does it differentiate between the two?
That's a good question. It says all legislation. And I remember during the course of discussion with the introducer at the time that was to include resolutions as well as bills.
Then I would like to make a motion to refer resolution. What is it? 73-15 as amended to is it the Environmental Management Commission?
And the Director of Environmental.
And Director of Environmental Management.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Lagan and seconded by Ms. Poindexter to refer Resolution 73-15 as amended to the Environmental Management Commission and the Director of Environmental Management. Any discussion? Mr. Lagan.
And I just wanted to clarify, I'm not doing this in any way to shut down the reso. I'm just doing this to comply with the current procedures that we have in our code.
Understood. Mr. Kanuha?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I remember going through this the last go around the previous term, and it really bothered me that we couldn't vote on something, and we had to send it to the Environmental Management Commission and the Director of Environmental Management, and I think that's why we had to get the opinion from the Corporation Counsel. But I wanna make sure that that's still the same position from our Corporation Counsel on the actual language saying that we shall refer this to the Environmental Management Commission, because we talk about a lot of these things and we can't either move it forward or move it out or vote on it. It kind of bothers me that we have to go through that process and we have to vote yes. No, you can withdraw a bill, but the bill was amended. Now it's within the full council. So that's my question, Madam Chair.
I think Corporation Counsel is conferring with our clerk at this point. So would you like to take a short recess?
No, they can look it up, but I think Mr. Chung had I'll wait.
Oh, actually,
Mr. Chung?
Yeah, and I agree with Chairman Kanuha on this. I'm kind of troubled by this whole process myself. This is the second time we've talked about this. Devoted a lot of time on this, and I'm just wondering if it's just a matter of it coming to committee and we're supposed to immediately refer it. And I got no problem with that, but we spent a lot of time talking about this, and I'd like to vote one way or the other, actually. And I'm not really, angry at the clerk, because, sometimes these things just come up, and, it's an educational process all the way through. But so what's going to be the process from now on?
Let me check with the clerk at this time. Mr. Clerk.
The way that, and that's a good point, and we've thought about this as far as perhaps it'd even be better to refer to them before the committee even hears it. Because the wording of the ordinance is not abundantly clear, it appears to provide options to the committee and how it handles it. The only thing that appears clear is that the council shouldn't vote on this until it goes there. Other than that, it seems to be open. And I recall the discussion from the last term, and and clearly I'm not an attorney, and but I also was somewhat. The decision that essentially you didn't have any choice but to refer it was an interesting one. So, anyway.
Council members, I'm going to ask Ms. Stebbins to comment at this time.
Good afternoon, Molly Stebbins, Corporation Counsel. So it's Section 2-207 of the Hawaii County Code, and the pertinent language says the Director and Commission shall each submit comments and recommendations on all legislation relating to the functions and duties of the department, including any ordinance to amend Chapter 20 or Chapter 21, to the council prior to council action. And then it goes on to provide the 45-day time limit for the Environmental Management Commission to provide their comments or recommendations to the council. So it, doesn't set forth the exact process step by step, but I think my reading of the section would essentially require that any legislation, be it it doesn't specify whether it needs to is limited to ordinances. It just says legislation. So that would encompass resolutions or bills that I don't think that at the committee level, you're prohibited from, again, it's kind of vague, from discussing and voting on it at the committee level, but then perhaps the next appropriate step is to refer it to the commission for their input before it then would go on to be considered by the full council.
So
and I'm sorry, because I'm just looking at this now, so this is sort of my reading as I sit here and read the requirements. I didn't look into this previously.
Then if I'm understanding what you've just told us, the current motion on the floor is appropriate, that we send our amended reso to the commission and the director. And then that's pretty much what we're obligated to do at this point, is to vote on referring it.
Yes, it does sound like it should be, like this section of the code requires that the commission and the director weigh in prior to council action.
Okay, thank you.
What
I think
code
Mr.
section is that?
Chung may have a question.
Section 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. I spoke out of turn.
Section 2-207. The second paragraph.
Can I ask one more clarification?
Yeah, I have
just,
several council members with questions. So, Ms.
and just with
Willie.
regard, if I could just ask John first, with regard to withdrawing it, because that's sort of before, that's not, in my mind, council action. But you said I can't do that.
Right.
Because of what rule?
Well, our rules state that a maker of a motion we withdraw prior to any action by the committee or council. So, amending is seen as an action. So we've always held that that's been the case, that once.
And could I ask that we suspend that rule?
I think rules are suspendable provided that they don't violate any other state laws, sunshine or anything, or any county ordinances, or that they don't violate any other parliamentary laws. And as far as I'm concerned, I think if the committee were in agreement by way of a vote, a 2/3 vote, that suspending that rule to allow you to withdraw it does not violate parliamentary laws, our rules, or anything else, and I think that would be, in my mind, at least on the fly, thinking about it, that would be reasonable and would be acceptable. So if there were a motion to suspend the rules to allow you to withdraw the matter because it's been amended, I believe that would be a viable motion that the committee could consider.
I'm going to call on Mr. Chung, but let me just ask you, Mr. Clerk, we would need to withdraw the current motion on the floor in order to...
I don't even think that would be necessary because a motion to suspend the rules can happen at any point in time.
And then that would just do away with the current
apparently
motion.
With the understanding of what the purpose would be, because of Ms. Willie just made a statement that she would be interested in doing that. I think it'd be okay to just continue along this path if somebody wanted to do that.
Okay. Then, Mr. Chung, did you want to?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I'm wondering if we could just take a 5-minute recess so I can digest all of this and
Thank you. I'm going to take
this with Corp Counsel.
Okay. Mr. Lagan, before recess, would you like to comment?
I have new information. Peter Sir actually pointed this out, and I want to see if Corporation Counsel can make a opinion on this. It says on our rule number 24, bills and resolutions, resolutions are non-legislative acts of the council, and except as otherwise provided by law, no resolution shall have the force of law. So it says it's non-legislative act, and it said, according to that rule that you pointed out, that any legislative, what was it? All legislation. And it's saying on our resolutions that it's a non-legislative act of the council. So I feel that's valid, but I would have to defer all legal opinion to our Corporation Counsel. I just got new information, and Peter Sir pointed it out, so I might as well share it with everyone.
Okay. Mr. Ligon, that may be semantics, but at this point, I'm going to take a recess because if we're able to withdraw this reso, then that wouldn't apply anyway. So, okay, well, we're in recess. Thank you.
Where is that? This thing. First of all, it begs the question as to whether. This doesn't say that we're supposed to. This says the director. No. They are bound. Not us referring to them. I mean, you would think. I don't know. I don't know. It would be incumbent upon us to let them know. Yeah. Yeah.
Where's the provision that says that we have to? That's exactly what I'm reading too. I agree.
Everybody ready? Okay. Sorry, I'm going to call the meeting back to order and check with our Corporation Counsel as to what advice she has for us at this time.
It looks like your options at this point are to withdraw the resolution, which, given the reasoning articulated by Deputy County Clerk John Henricks, I think that would be reasonable. If it's not withdrawn and you move forward, then I think we're stuck with sort of a vaguely worded code provision that doesn't clearly set forth what the exact steps are, but in trying to comply with what seems to be the spirit of it, I would suggest that the matter be referred to the commission and the director for their input and comments in accordance with that section of the code. If you do move forward, if you withdraw it, then that's basically that issue is moot.
Mr. Chung.
I'm going to make an argument in support of voting on this measure today. And I'm just reading from what has been told to me as being the basis or bases for referring this to the commission. Section 2-207 states, the director and commission shall each submit comments and recommendations on all legislation relating to the functions and duties of the department, blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to the county charter. And as Mr. Iligan and his aide, Mr. Sir, pointed out, legislative acts do not include resolutions. It's in the county charter. Actions of the council. Every legislative act of the council shall be by ordinance. Non-legislative acts of the council may be by resolution. So, we're dealing with legislation in this ordinance, but what we're dealing here with today is a non-legislative act by the county charter. I say we vote on it today.
Mr. Iligan.
I will withdraw my motion of referral. I believe that's the motion that we're currently in right now. And I think that brings us back to the main motion. And I guess Corporation Counsel, if you have anything else further to say, I currently agree with Committee Member Chung, and I guess that's where I'll stand, unless I hear something otherwise that will convince me. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Ms. Willie.
Okay. I previously said I was withdrawing this, and then I was stopped as a point of order. But if the point of order, and when our deputy clerk said, no, you can't do that, okay? But if we're now deciding that I can do that, then I think we go back to that point, and I can withdraw, and we don't get to the decision of whether it's non-debatable, and we go to, and that's it.
Ms. Willie, my understanding is that we would have to suspend our rules in order for you to withdraw. And I'm not sure, I don't have a set of rules here, so I would have to ask the clerk what rule that is and if that is something we can entertain.
Are you talking about the rule that says that withdrawal of motions?
Yes, Ms. Willie had asked if she can withdraw. She would like to withdraw this resolution at this time.
That'll be rule number 14-2.
14-2?
14-2, which reads, after a motion is stated or read, is deemed to be in the possession of the council or committee, and it shall be disposed of by vote of that body. However, any motion may be withdrawn by the member making the motion without consent of the corresponding second at any time before a decision or amendment.
Okay, and our understanding is that because we have amended it, it would be necessary to suspend Rule 14-2 in order for Ms. Willie to withdraw her resolution. Ms. Willie, did you want to make that motion?
I'd like to move to suspend the rules so that I can withdraw this at this time.
Okay. It's been moved by Ms. Willie and seconded by Mr. Iligon. Is there any discussion? Or no discussion, I'm sorry. No discussion on the rule suspension. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, then that's 8 ayes. Mr. Onishi is excused. And Ms. Willie, you have the floor.
So I'm withdrawing this resolution, and I think that's all I need to say.
Madam Chair, motion to adjourn.
Okay, moved by Mr. Iligon, seconded by Ms. David to adjourn. Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's 8 ayes, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Stebbins.